Chapter 10, the word as DNA instruction. Stalled replication and biochemical bumps. Gentlemen, start your engines. Idea strain 95. King tells scribe to destroy writings. Request scribe to be replaced. Idea strain 96. King bears God's book. King is great word. Objective 7. In order to discover how the deceased sun god restores the eye of Horus, we need to understand the signs suggesting DNA transcription and repair, keeping in mind the continued coherence and the unity of our expanding matrices. Transmitting messages in biology and is electrolytic and can be described as the migration or flow of ions down electrical gradients. So we could say that the journey of the sunbark through the Duat simulates the flow of ions or supramolecular message navigating the protein gradients. Recall that the deceased is one who reveals what has been said to him. He also dispatches the word of the self-created to the multitudes and the captains. The bark. Mine is the writing, he insists. And I am in charge of the record of the word of God. This is the word which was in darkness. As for any spirit who knows it, he will live among the living. Fire is about it, which contains the efflux of Osiris. So the word is darkness in Osiris. The DNA of lambda prophets on the host chromosome. And influx relates to the potential outflow of phage progeny related to the induction of the prophet. At the point of return to the origin of time or the foundation of forms or first DNA, the deceased states that as heir of the horizon and Atum, he speaks and prepares a path for Ra when he comes to a halt. The application of the word of Atum is the activity of DNA replication and information transfer processes. All these textual references use the idea of speech and the words to point to the lambda DNA instruction, for the deceased bears the word of God, the lambda DNA of the Horus lineage, which now supplants the DNA of the human or Seth lineage. So now we have word equals DNA instructions of Horus lineage. By decoding word as lambda DNA instruction, we now can understand the idea of copying words or DNA transcription. Reviewing the reference to the words in the Amduat in figure 10.1, the process of DNA transcription and replication is explained in terms of uttering words, copying words, and destiny because of words, resulting in the subsequent translation to protein. Similarly, biologists commonly use the metaphor of words to refer to the process in which the DNA instructions are translated from the language of nucleic acid into the language of proteins, that is, from nucleotides to amino acids. In the cell is a translation engine that converts the nucleotide words into amino acid words. Likewise, genetic engineers clone books for genomic libraries. When the deceased states, I shall live forever, I am he who dispatches the word of the gods to Ra. I have come that I may report a message to its recipient. The deceased is reporting the message, his DNA or genetic heritage, to the sun god Ra, who together with the deceased may represent the initiation of transcription by the enzyme RNA polymerase, the most pervasive form of gene regulation from bacteria to higher eukaryotes. So now we have decoded copying words equal DNA transcription into messenger RNA. Boy, gonna show y'all this chart real fast and the rest of that page. Boom. Get that chart. Alright. DNA directed RNA polymerase. Idea strand 49 through 50. Deceased sun god is Thoth in authority. Thoth and book splits open mouth. Thoth cuts off head of Seth and followers. Idea strand 51 through 52. Thoth gleams with eye of Horus, crosses sky, and deceased and Ra, and reassembles deceased. DNA directed RNA polymerase, or RNAP, synthesizes RNA. It is an enzyme that is evolutionarily conserved across all domains of life in terms of function, structure, and sequence. The core enzyme in bacteria synthesizes the RNA from a DNA template. It has 4 polypeptide subunits, but it cannot initiate transcription by itself because the core enzyme does not recognize promoters. Another protein, Sigma subunit, binds to it to form the haloenzyme or haloenzyme. The Sigma subunit tells RNAP where in the genomic DNA to start transcription by recognizing a section of the gene's DNA called the promoter region. And then it melts the DNA to expose one of the double helix strands. The RNAP will use a template to synthesize RNA. As mentioned, phage lambda takes over the replication machinery of the host cell, and geneticists theorize that replication of phage lambda begins with recombination, which the Egyptian evidence supports. Thus, it seems logical to propose that the god Thoth represents this activity of copying words, that is, transcription and replication within the host cell. Thoth was the divine messenger, and the Greeks associated him with Hermes Trismegistus. In the first dynasty, he is associated with a dog-headed baboon, while in later periods he is an ibis form, carrying a pen and a palette of the scribe. Thoth is the lord of the sacred and the reenactment of divine speech. He is also responsible for beheading Seth and his followers, suggesting the power of his DNA transcription over that of Seth's eye, which produces the human species. Thoth is also present with the deceased sun god, crossing the sky, performing the duties of a scribe, that is, transcription and replication in the earth host cell. Once again, the text claims the deceased sun god is Thoth because of the non-locality, a quantum phenomenon where the motion of atoms simultaneously affects and relies on the motion of the neighboring atoms. However, for ease of understanding, we will treat Thoth as a separate unit and assign him the status of DNA-directed RNA polymerase. Decoded, Thoth equals DNA-directed RNAP. Idea strand 62. Ra and crew stop by serpent on mountain. Deceased sun god stops the stopping of eldest god. The deceased prepares a path for Ra when he comes to a halt. That is, he helps the sun god start again after stopping. In the quantum world, UV or ultraviolet damage of DNA can produce thymine dimers, which block replication and transcription. In other words, the RNA polymerase idles at the site. A gap is left opposite the thymine dimer, which would be lethal because in the next round of replication it would generate a double strand break. A thymine dimer forms when UV damage causes an extra chemical bond between adjacent thymines. The dimer forms a kink or biochemical bump in the double helix that results in mismatch bases. Yet there are polymers that can overcome this obstacle. Biologists discovered the new zeta polymers, the 6 eukaryotic DNA polymers, to be described that replicates past a thymine dimer, enabling a cell to replicate its DNA even though the UV-induced thymine dimer were not repaired. And